A very good morning to all of you. At the outset, I'd like to thank Professor Gamal Sarur for giving me this opportunity to be in Egypt for the fourth time. And it's always been a pleasure. For 30 years in my life, I was trying to visit Egypt and I could not. And in the last 3 years, this is my fourth visit. And I think a kind of relationship which we have developed over the years. So we used to look towards you in awe right from when we were very, very young. And it's so nice to be sharing this podium with you. And I was just in the morning talking to one of our good friends, Osama Shoki, and he was just telling him that I am in Egypt and where are you? And he said, I'm in India. Now, imagine, I was missing a great meeting in India and he's missing a great meeting here and he's being in India. And that's what our whole relationship is all about. It's hard to be an opening batsman after a long, long flight and a load of travel, but I'll try and do some justice because all these meetings are about igniting each other. And today, the topic which I have chosen also is something similar. It's inflammation and fertility. I come from the city of the beautiful Taj Mahal, the city of love, and I bring you greetings from there and also our Indian Society of Assisted Reproduction and Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Uh, we know that inflammation means to ignite, and that's exactly what I think I'm going to do today. And inflammation is a normal response of the body to any kind of injury or infection. And we know there are two types of inflammation. One is acute and the other is chronic. Now, acute one is eradicated by the immediate response of the body and the repair and regeneration takes place. But the chronic one, the repair and the regeneration also along with the irritation and inflammation keeps on going. And that is one of the basic differences between the two. Now, there are many, many causes for chronic inflammation. I'm sure all of us know about it, but I'm going to give you a very different perspective to think about because we know injury, infection, aging, and a lot of autoimmune diseases, obesity, chronic stress, they all lead to all kinds of chronic inflammation. And this can have a lot of toll on all the possible organs of our body, and we actually succumb to many of them in due course of time, whether it's cardiovascular disease or malignancies or metabolic complications and so on. Now, reproductive system is also not left alone. Now, in the reproductive system, we do have a small amount of normal inflammation, which is there, which is very, very important for the menstruation or ovulation or implantation and parturition. But the initiation and maintenance of this inflammatory process is also important for many other reproductive tract diseases, and that's something which we need to keep in mind. Now, when we talk of infertility, we are talking of mainly three problems. One, the anatomical abnormalities or the ovulatory disorders or the male factor. Now, reactive oxygen species or the oxidative stress, there is a balance between the pathological and the physiological roles. Now, if everything is in balance, a physiological role will be there and will lead to normal fertility. But as soon as this balance is disturbed, we have a lot of cascade of events which would probably lead to infertility. I'm just giving you a short example of the anatomical abnormalities. Now, we have infection, inflammation, ischemia, and surgical injuries which can cause a lot of pain and other things. And most of the times, whenever there's an injury and inflammation, there is a rise in temperature. And the body starts producing heat shock proteins, which are very unique and are structurally conserved proteins. Now, what has been seen, I'm just giving you a small example, that antibodies to these heat shock proteins actually are found in 70% of the women who have occluded fallopian tubes, meaning that inflammation is one of the major reasons for that. I am not going to go into the details of how chronic inflammation and what are the cascade of events which happen. We all understand that there are cytokines, there are interleukins which are there. There is something called as tumor necrosis factor and VEGF. All of these interactions would lead to proliferation, vascularization, and maintenance. Just giving you short examples of a few. major problems, chlamydial infection, which is there and is one of the major reasons for infertility. And we know that this infection, the cascade of events or because of inflammation is such that there is a lot of scarring which ultimately can lead to the occlusion of the tubes. Similarly, staph infections, whether it is in men or women, again leads to a lot of events where subfertility is the ultimate result, whether it is an interaction with the hormones or with disrupted oogenesis or with abnormal menstrual cycle or with pregnancy abnormalities. Similarly, with men, staph infections could lead to disrupted spermatogenesis, leads to prostatitis and again male subfertility. Tuberculosis is another very big example. Now, we have pro-inflammatory response and we have an anti-inflammatory response. And the balance between the two actually decides whether there is going to be a dormant disease or an active disease. And that's where it is so very important that the body's response and also the bacterial load which happens are very, very important. Endometriosis is another such example. It's such a complex multifactorial disease, but if you look at it, inflammation is the crux of everything which happens in the body as far as endometriosis is concerned. And whether it is increase in the estrogen and the decrease in the progesterone or impaired follicular genesis or the DNA damage to the oocytes, even impairment in the desideralization, because that is something which is again a very important factor as far as implantation is concerned in endometriosis, and even the sperm motility. Now, PCOS, another important example. Chronic low-grade inflammation has emerged as a key contributor to the pathogenesis of PCOS, and that's something which we must think about. Now, what we don't normally pay attention, and I'm glad that there is a lecture in this conference on that, because FIGO is definitely laying a lot of stress on the environmental factors. Because some of the factors we know, but there are many which we don't pay attention, and we are actually breathing, using, and eating and are exposed to many of these environmental factors which are producing chronic inflammation and stress in our bodies. Whether it is plastics or bisphenol acetate or the cosmetics which we use or the food or the pesticides which we eat, all of them are leading to oxidative stress, they are leading to methylation problems, and they're also leading to, and it's not only affecting our body, it's affecting our gametes, meaning it is intergenerational or transgenerational. Basically, it is being transmitted to the generations to come. Now, as I said, small amount of inflammation is a process which is there, right? Ovulation would not happen if that little inflammatory process was not there. Corpus luteum would not function if there was that small amount of inflammation not there. But if this inflammation is there, most of the times which we have seen is that ovulation is happening because of the LH surge, and this is triggered by the LH. Now, very recently, certain studies have come up which say that the decrease in the oocyte pool, which is there in our bodies right after birth, the oocyte pool decreases immediately, it starts decreasing. Ovulatory luteinizing hormone surge may be one of the contributors, and that is something which we should be definitely looking into. Similarly, why menstruation happens? The endometrium is loaded with macrophages and natural killer cells, which bring about the destruction of the endometrium, and the cycle goes on of the regeneration. But if this balance is not maintained, like it happens in endometriosis, now what happens is that there's a shift in the implantation window, and that's where implantation is going to be poor and subfertility is going to be there. Similarly, chronic endometritis, chronic inflammation is there, will lead to formation of the endometrial polyps and also the placental abnormalities. Obesity, I come from the obesity capital of the world, the diabetic capital of the world, and also the preterm birth capital of the world, India. Now, obesity leads to chronic inflammation again, and that's again a major contributor, and it's on the rise all over the world. And these cytokines and adipokines, which are produced by the adipocyte cells, again lead to these chronic inflammatory responses. Now, what happens with these chronic inflammatory responses. If you look at the female, it will affect the oogenesis, it affects the deserialization of the endometrium, it affects the gonadotropin production, and also if you see there are increased leptins, TNF, alpha and interleukins which are being produced, will ultimately lead to insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia and infertility. And a similar thing happens with the males in obesity. So if you're looking at, again, there is a definite problem with the production of Sertoli cell functions, disrupted spermatogenesis, and also inhibition of sperm maturation. Another very important aspect which is coming up is the microbiome, the gut microbiome. Again, a big contributor to this inflammatory process, whether it is men or women, both are equally affected. And that's where whatever we are eating, again, is very, very important that the good bacteria are maintained in our system, because that is where a lot of processes of problems start with. Now, implantation again is regulated with a small amount of inflammatory process. But what we have to understand is that if it is more, if the balance is not maintained between Th1 and Th2, or interleukin 6 and interleukin 1b, or VGEF and PIB, now that again will lead to subfertility. Now, with all these thoughts in place, how do you really investigate? There are many markers of inflammation, but most of the times we are looking at the CRP, which is C-reactive protein, or we are looking at the ESR, and many other imaging technology can be used. I'm not going to go into these details, but CRP was the one which was very easily studied, and there were multiple publications which were there. So we tried to find out, is there a relationship between a rise or raise in the CRP and the outcomes in IVF cycles? And what was seen was that women who were low in CRP, there was a small rise in the C-reactive protein at the time of peri-implantation. But in this particular study, systemic review, where 10 studies were actually included, what was not really studied was that what happens to the ones who already had a raised CRP, and is the outcome different as far as fertility or fecundity is concerned. And earlier this year, a publication came which said that they did not find any evidence between a raised CRP and fecundability. But they also said that the confidence interval between their study was a little wider, so further studies are required, so the door is not really closed. And another study in this year itself came up and said that it may not have an impact on the clinical pregnancy rate, but it definitely has an increase in the risk of the pregnancy loss. Now, so recurrent implantation failure cases, again, we must definitely look into the inflammatory process. Now, how can you really look? Whenever the thought is there have been two very recently developed tests. One is called as Receptiva DX, which has been developed specially for endometriosis cases, because endometriosis has a protein marker called BCL6, which is there. And if this is raised, then definitely there is a blockage as far as implantation is concerned. And the other one is a systemic inflammation fertility test, which is again a group of markers along with BMI, which would definitely look into whether this inflammatory process can actually have an effect, and a number of studies can be carried out. Now, what is the treatment? If you are looking at inflammation, acute inflammation, of course, you will treat it as acute inflammation. And the chronic inflammation needs a lot of studies and modification into the system. And we have to understand that apart from lifestyle modification, and a lot of administration of the antioxidative agents which can be given to especially men, they have been proved, to give some relief as far as inflammation is concerned. Obesity management is one of the key factors, because obesity is something which is a chronic low-grade inflammation which keeps on happening in the body. And that's where obesity management is one of the very key things which we must definitely be looking into. Can we really prevent chronic inflammation? The answer is yes. By losing weight, getting into a very healthy lifestyle, again very important, Physical activity is also important. Smoking, alcohol, they all are big contributors, so we need to curb these. And we also have to understand that diet also plays a great role. And in women, alcohol consumption should be avoided not only in pregnancy but also in the periconception period. And that's something which I really am trying to now bring out with this lecture. Avoiding of inflammatory foods, very, very important. And we know what they are. All these fast foods which we are eating, the red meat, the grain products, they all cause inflammation and these need to be really curbed. Anti-inflammatory foods, is there something like that? Yes, the Mediterranean diet is phenomenal as far as avoiding inflammation is concerned, especially tomatoes, olive oil, green leafy vegetables, nuts, and so on. Now, association between physical activity and infertility, especially in men, it has been seen that there is an inverse relationship and it should be continued. Now, this has led to a whole new management protocols as far as subfertile couples are concerned. And we are now looking at personalized nutrition management in especially female and male infertility. And the components of this, nutrigenetics. Now, analysis of the gene variants, specific metabolic pathways which are there, like you have the MTH, FR, and so on. The nutrigenomics, the dietary fatty acids and all, now the dietary compounds which, have an epigenetic anti-inflammatory properties. The metabolomics, again, very important because understanding and analyzing the gut barriers, and the microbiomics, assessing the gut eubiosis, and also replenishing the good bacteria and the vitamin D supplementation. And as I said, studies are already on that anti-inflammatory diets can help you with the fertility, and Mediterranean diet has been very recently studied, and it says that integration of anti-inflammatory dietary patterns as low-risk adjunctive fertility treatments may improve infertility partially or even fully, and this is something which should be really looked into. So what are the take-home messages? Inflammation is our natural body's response, yes, but if there is prolonged inflammation, it can lead to a number of issues, not only in our reproductive tract, but all across the body, and that is something which is very important for us to understand. And inflammatory environment is something which is not something which we are really looking at. So we need to really change, understand and change, because this is not going to stay here only with us. Today, there is a whole load of understanding that maternal low-grade chronic inflammation and the intrauterine programming, they go hand in hand. So it's not only this generation, but it is transgenerational. And I think it is high time that we look at the future of our generations, whether it is health or environment. So I'd really like to thank each and every one of you. I hope I have given you some food for thought, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jaideep. I think we have 5 minutes for 1 or 2 questions.
There's been a lot of discussion in America about chronic endometritis. Big issue in fertility and sterility a month or so ago. There's been a lot of discussion, about endometritis, chronic endometritis, and not much discussion really about this massive look at inflammation in general. But there's also been a lot of talk in the past 5 years about the endometrial scratch. So when we use just a Pipelle, we actually do a full curettage with it. We're not just doing a diagnosis with we're not trying to create inflammation.
Yes.
We're doing it in the luteal phase and just trying to make a diagnosis with a full curettage in an easy way on a patient.
Yes.
With no anesthesia. And what do you think? Do we go by the presence of plasma cells? That's the classic. Or what do you think is happening? We know that we improve the receptivity if we diagnose chronic endometritis and put them on antibiotics for 2 months. I'd like to know what you think about this one specific area of uterine receptivity.
Yeah, I think endometrial receptivity also has many contributors. I can't really only say because in our part of the world, chronic endometritis because of tuberculosis, so macrophages are the ones which are, too many there, or natural killer cells are too many there. So, and this is a very new branch. I mean, I'm just giving food for thought. So we need number of studies basically to understand what is happening, what is the reason, because if you're looking at endometriosis, then, BCL6 is the one which is raised. So there are a lot of things which we need to, it's opening up Lithora's box. But I understand that when we are doing the scratch, the pro-inflammatory reaction which we are producing, plus what is also important today, which number of studies are going on, is the lactobacillus colonization, which is there, and it's different in each part of the body, the microbiome. That is going to give us a huge insight into understanding all these processes.
Thanks a lot for this comprehensive review of the relation between anti-inflammatory and a lot of disorders. My question about, are you recommending what's available in the market? This is for treatment of endometriosis, and this is for treatment of fibroid, depending on some ingredients as you mentioned.
If I understand you well, what I'm trying to right now point is that our unhealthy lifestyle and our environment, our diet, is again contributing a lot to increasing the disease processes and the infection and inflammation in the body. So if we curb all those along with a good diagnosis, we're going to prevent a lot of problems in ourselves and also in our future generations, and also improvise the fertility.
There is no evidence supporting the use of these ingredients available in the market for treatment of all of these disorders.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
There is no evidence to support the use of these ingredients, the commercial one, for treatment of disorders, endometriosis, enhancing the fertility, and a lot of available in the market.
No, because the studies are now very recent, and I'm sure the evidence will build up.
The last question, Dominique, please.
Well, thank you, Dominique de Ziegler in Paris. Very nice talk. Now, however, we say sometimes what goes around comes around, okay? And now there are questions as to whether BCL6 is really a marker for receptivity. When you look at euploid embryo transfers, there's no difference between BCL6 high and low levels in terms of implantation. And the same is true for chronic endometritis. Doesn't seem to play a role in terms of implantation of euploid embryos. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think I did point out that pregnancy rates may not get affected, but the pregnancy loss is something which is definitely higher. So this is one of the very recent publications which was there, and I think we need to explore it further.
The very last question, Tan, please. Professor Tan.
Hi, thank you, SL Tan, Montreal. I enjoyed your talk tremendously because I think it opens up a totally new area that we should be exploring. The only comments I would say would be, I agree with all your investigation, the tests, but before going on to actual medications like disease-modifying drugs and so on, you maybe should consider other things like more natural products that come from India, for example. There are talks about using vitamin D3 supplements, curcumin, piperine, resveratrol.
Yeah.
Taking
Yes.
some red grapes,
Yeah.
seeds from France.
I agree.
This sort of stuff are, if nothing, my feeling is that at least even if it doesn't cause any good, it doesn't cause any harm.
I agree.
But the moment you take drugs, the evidence has been a bit more certain.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
this
so
excellent
much. Thank
presentation.
you.
Thank you.